welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, a new podcast series featuring my dear friend, the wonderful author, the brilliant writer, David Parker, who is coming to us from San Francisco. He's the author of Income and Wealth and the new book, A San Francisco Conservative. Hey, David, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing well. Despite the bridge behind me, which is for sale, by the way, I am coming
I'll
to
buy
you.
it.
Coming to you from you're too wise an investor. You would never buy that bridge, but I'm coming
tear
to you
it down and put condos. Yeah.
Exactly. But at any rate, as David knows, I'm a lifelong journalist. Work for CBS News and CNN and Good Morning America, and so This is certainly an interesting time to be a journalist. So many hot stories in the news, important stories in the news. And what has been lacking much of that time is historical context. And one of the reasons I love David's books is because those books provide historical context to what the progressives are saying, as he often reminds me, what Aristotle would say to our current elected representatives and so on. And speaking to recently elected representatives, I know we were recently talking about some of your predictions over the years, which have been spot on. And you could really see the rise of Donald Trump coming, right? I mean, I remember I would look at the New York Times on election night or election morning, and they said 80% in favor of Hillary Clinton, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah. One reason I write, because I had such strong predictions during my lifetime that I feel I have some insight, because my predictions seem to be right all the time. And if I'm not sure, I don't predict. But in 2015, when Donald Trump announced I'm going to run for president, I was with some people and everybody laughed. And I said spontaneously, he won. Put dead silence in the room. No question of mine, he won. I said, and I didn't have to think about it. It just popped out of my mouth. I just knew it. And in 2016, on the eve of the election, some polls had Hillary at 90%. All polls had a clear majority for Hillary. And on the eve, I says, no, he won. How could you be so sure? Boom. He wasn't so sure. He was in New York doing hotel deals with Putin. And he thought he wasn't going to win.
Well, it's a good PR stunt to run for president, right?
A PR stunt?
Well, I just didn't know. I mean, some writers have said he didn't really expect to win, or Melania didn't really think he was going to win, and like, oh my gosh, he won.
Because he represents what people are not saying. So what happened? Yeah, that's a good point. In the polls, everybody lies. So don't look at the polls. Don't read the newspapers, actually. The newspapers are business. They're saying what people want. They think their readers want to hear. So nobody's getting honest news. Because if it's honest, they might not buy the paper. So when it came down to placing your vote, people held their nose. Let's see what happens. There was a consensus in the country on the election 2016 that neither political party had any intention of solving the problems that all people agree are American problem, left and right. We all agree that public schools are not doing too well. No dispute. The U.S. Department of Education says the nation is 36% proficient in reading. Proficient, that's a euphemism for D+. It's
terrible, yeah.
They don't say that, yeah. And we all agree that the cost of healthcare is too high. It's higher than anywhere in the world. Should be the price of auto insurance, which it was before Medicare. It's 3 or 4 times that. It's twice anywhere in the world. Everyone agrees on that. And then the vague notion of lax law enforcement. We all kind of acknowledge, if you live in San Francisco, the homeless live in the sidewalk, and that's all there is to it. It's the new law. And there's muggings and immigration people come running in through the border and nobody cares. Turns out people do care a little bit. And so it's just there's a consensus that let's see what happens. Let's put Donald Trump in there and let's see what happens. And maybe they won't do that again, but because he's not a good person, but in a sense, he represents what people are mad about.
Yeah.
And for that very reason, they may put him in again.
Yeah.
For that very reason, because maybe I'm speaking too long, but I'm in California and Governor Newsom ran for office saying, I'm going to solve the homeless problem. And he got into office and says, wow, I have such a big majority. I got the next election. I don't have to do a thing. And I'm not going to do a thing. I got it. I'm in. I may run for president, in fact. And he almost got recalled. No, he didn't almost, but people thought about recalling him in the same way they may think about recalling, Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, it's funny.
Nothing is being done, and no intention of doing anything.
A few years before I ever got into the news business, there was a very popular movie out. I'm sure it was up for Oscars. Might have won the Best Oscar Award. Network. By Patty Chayefsky, and about the news anchor man going to he said, go to the window, throw it open and shout, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that seems to be how people are feeling right now. And again, now we're already in primary season, leading up to the November elections, at the time that we're recording this. I think people probably watch and listen to this, prior to the November midterm elections. But even though a couple people, like in the days after, I forget if it was right after impeachment number 2 for Donald Trump, or January 6th, when people are storming the Capitol, Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy came out and said, this is terrible. I think Mr. Trump had something to do with this. And then 24 hours later, they said, oh no. And so candidates that Donald Trump has supported just recently have been doing well in the primaries. And it looks like he may be on his way again. I was just curious what you think of that.
Because he represents that consensus that nobody will admit to belonging to. And he knows it. And I think the Republican Party knows that that the Ohio voters who put in Vance just now for the primaries, that he represents all those people. And that is power. When you represent half the nation, even if the nation doesn't admit it, but when they go to the polls, when they go to the vote, they will admit it at that moment.
Yeah.
So that everybody knows he represents half the nation.
Yeah. So David, you've spent 35,000 hours studying history and politics and economy. What does that tell us? Aren't our elected representatives supposed to act in the best interest of the people? In other words, not interfere in our lives?
Well, that's the vision of the founding fathers. We fought a revolutionary war to remove government from our life and bring in individual responsibility in exchange. Thomas Jefferson said at the beginning of the war, we'll have no king or queen, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone will have the vote, regardless of your wealth, whether you own property or not, regardless of your social status. Everyone gets to vote. There's no country in the world where that exists. And the government will be so small, you won't even know it's there. You're going to be on your own. And if you don't like that idea, you should leave. And thousands of people left. They fled to Canada. That's why Canada is European socialism.
Yeah.
Americans are people who left Europe or anywhere in the world where government was trying to help them. No, we don't want government helping us. We'll help ourselves. That's who we are. That's who we are.
Yeah.
And indirectly, Trump is saying that too. Yeah. Or the voters who are not saying what they're thinking, that's what they believe.
Well, I will take a moment before I have a kind of a follow-up question. So shifting gears a little bit, but I just want to remind everyone, if you're joining us midstream, that you're watching or listening to, or both, a San Francisco Conservative, our new podcast series. I'm Tom Martin, and bringing my journalistic love of asking questions and great conversation to hearing the well-researched scholarly views of David Parker, author of Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. So since we're talking about controversial topics today, like Donald Trump, or polarizing topics a little bit, again, I don't want to date this episode too much, but something has come out. Someone uncovered an opinion well in advance from the Supreme Court. It looks like with this new conservative majority in the Supreme Court, they may reverse Roe versus Wade, which has been taken for granted for 50 years. And so people are starting to ask, well, what kind of rights do we have? And I know you've researched that topic, the founding fathers and the history of our US Constitution. I'd love to hear your thoughts about all that.
Constitution is a general set of principles. It's one page. You can go to Washington, D.C. and take a look at it. It's one page. It's meant to be timeless. And they went out of their way not to lock onto issues of the day. So when issues came up they could never imagine, like Roe versus Wade or anything, the document would hold. So can you answer me, Tom? Is an egg that's 15 days old, is that a human life? That's right. Who knows? Supreme Court doesn't know either. So the Supreme Court shouldn't decide. You don't decide on something that you have no idea. If half the nation believes in God and half the nation doesn't believe, the Supreme Court should stay away from issues like that. Is abortion or murder in the first 30 days or 60 days? That's a big issue. Supreme Court says we don't know, and Darwin, it's a couple hundred years now. No, yeah, almost. And modern science and genetic engineering and everything come in. Supreme Court shouldn't be talking about stuff like that. In other words, people make their own decision. Yeah. If a state or a group of, or a community or a county or want to make a law because everybody agrees that there's no abortion, a local community can make that law. If everybody agrees, there's nothing to. It's not illegal to say that, but the Constitution has nothing to say on that.
Well, would I don't know, but wouldn't a corollary of that be, reference to slavery? If 51% of the people thought, well, slavery is really okay, we need to do it to keep our economy humming, but that's surely a violation of an individual's human rights, right?
Yeah, our government is instituted to protect life, liberty, and property. And the founding fathers went out of their way not to talk slavery. They knew they needed the South to vote to ratify the Constitution. So they kept slavery out of it. They all knew slavery was bad. They all owned slaves. And Frederick Douglass says, don't talk about them as being slavers. They rose to the occasion. They knew their faults. They knew slavery was bad. They just were born with it. They didn't deal with it. At that time, they just fought a Revolutionary War. They're too wiped out to start a civil war against the people they were just fighting along with. The timing was wrong. So they just left slavery off the chart. But slavery that's immoral. That's a taking of somebody's life. That's clearly unconstitutional. Is murdering a 6 month or 6 weeks old egg, is that taking someone's life? And if that's not so clear, don't vote on it.
Right.
That's all. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, we have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to kind of circle back to, again, the Trump election, because it seems to me that our elected representatives in some states, speaking of states, are setting up, voting procedures that might disenfranchise people from voting. And, our good friend Mark mentioned that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but the way that our electoral college is set up, and Trump must have hired some pretty smart advisors because they won the states they needed for those electoral votes, even if Hillary did win the popular vote. So, that's the way our government works. And so, again, we're hearing about certain states that seem to be, you can't, again, I don't, sometimes you can't believe what you hear in the news. And this is a journalist saying it, but it's like you can't bring a bottle of water to an elderly lady standing in line for 3 hours to vote, or we're only allowed 2 ballot boxes per state or something ridiculous. But I'm just wondering if the representatives are falling out of sync with the people.
No. Well, first of all, Donald Trump himself said he thought it was wrong that a person would win the popular vote and then lose the election by electoral vote. He said that was wrong. But he said maybe Hillary didn't know that it's the electoral votes that win the election. Maybe this is news to her. So he ran his campaign that way. He said, were he to run would the popular vote win, he would run a completely different campaign, he said. So he won in that sense. And we have the great French political economist named Montesquieu, and he's the idea behind a bicameral legislature. We have a House of Representatives that's by proportion to the population. California has a lot of representatives in the House of Representatives, and Wyoming has 1 or 2. We have 50. But in the Senate, with our huge population, we have 2. And Wyoming, with no population, has 2.
Right.
And that's a way to not let the bigger states walk right over all the smaller states, because New York and California, and throw in one more state.
I'm here in Connecticut,
run the whole country,
Connecticut, the New York City area, and you're in California. Are there any states between Connecticut and California that really matter? I mean, really?
No.
Okay. Right.
I saw that poster from New York. There's nothing beyond Central Park. And there's one here. I think there's one from here. There's nothing beyond the Golden Gate Bridge.
And actually, I don't mean to interrupt or digress, but recently they had the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner, and late night talk show host Trevor Noah was the anchor, and he had some really funny lines. He said, "It's really an honor being in the same room as the most powerful man in America, Joe Manchin. You are doing a great job." And he's a senator from West Virginia. What population do they have in West Virginia? But,
yeah. There's probably a few senators who purposely moved to some of those states.
Mitt Romney.
Yeah. Romney, all of a sudden, he's in Utah. And and Hillary Clinton moved to New York at one time, did the same thing, as did Bobby Kennedy, who they're not from those states, where they thought they could win.
Yeah. Well, I think we could continue this conversation for a long, long time. So let's pick it up in another episode. But before we go, I just want to let people know that you can and should pick up copies of David's books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. And you can do that by visiting his website, davidparkeressays.com, or by going to amazon.com. So thanks, David. Great to see you, and look forward to the next time.
Me too. Thank you.